You and your team have recorded risks. In fact, if you set things up correctly, then they continue to record risks throughout the planning and execution of the project. So what do we do about them? We know how scary and how likely, but what do we do about it? This is where the power of project risk management comes into effect. We now go through the risk register, and any risk for which a response has not been designed, we design a response. So what ways can we respond to a risk? Let's list them, somewhat in order of preference for handling a risk. We can avoid or eliminate the risk. We can mitigate the risk. We can transfer the risk, and we can accept the risk. It will help to discuss these to know why we might perhaps choose the strategy for a risk in that order. Avoiding or eliminating the risk is about changing some aspect of the project such that the risk is no longer possible. It means the likeliness and impact cannot occur because the part of the project scope that introduces the risk is no longer part of the project because an alternative was found. For example, gasoline is presenting a fire hazard when using generators on the project site. A risk response of avoid and eliminate might be to switch to battery tools and moving the generators and charging stations off the site. Mitigating the risk is about devising a plan to reduce the likeliness that the risk will occur and/or reducing the impact should the risk occur. I hope you don't interpret mitigation as, well, if it happens, we will all run around and put out fires. That is close to accepting the risk, a response we'll talk about later. Mitigating a risk means implementing things now that do one or both. For example, if the risk were identified and analyzed as, there is a risk to the project that if vandals have access to the housing development, it could result in theft, damage, or fires causing complete losses. The housing development just south of us has experienced an issue like this just last year. Okay, so in short, you have a summary analysis of the impacts and the likeliness of this risk. If mitigation is to be one of the responses used to protect the project from this risk, thoroughly thought-out mitigation response might look like this. Reducing the likeliness of vandals getting on the site, we could put up fencing and a security guard. Reducing the impact should vandals get on the site anyways, we institute a patrol for the guard and an emergency response plan that is practiced with any guard performing that duty. We ensure keys to all vehicles are secured on the job site, and we secure all tools. Notice that these are not planning what we will do when it happens. Instead, we are choosing to do something now, which reduces the impact if it happens, and also will make it less likely to happen. That is mitigation. If you aren't doing something concrete now, you are likely just accepting the risk. Transferring risk is a response that means the risk still exists for the project, but the responsibility for the risk is given to another entity to manage. In some form, this does protect the project, but more than likely it protects the project resources budget rather than its schedule or scope. Purchasing insurance is a form of risk transfer, and so is formally having the risk to be managed by a specialized organization. It is still a risk. It still can affect your project. But you've done something to lessen the blow and maybe even made it a bit less likely to happen by having an expert handling the risk. In a way, it's kind of like mitigation. It's just a bit special because you've turned over the responsibility of managing the risk to another entity. So, you've reached the point in your analysis where you don't have an economical method of handling the risk in any of the previous strategies. It will mean that you accept the risk. But there is still value if you find your strategy to be to accept the risk. By doing the identification and analysis of the risk, you have in a small way mitigated it a bit. By reducing the shock impact from having already examined the possibility, and maybe even reduced its likeliness of occurring as discussing it has it on core team members' minds. You've certainly done something about the risk because it is on your register and now you can monitor it. Okay. You've done all this work of identifying, analyzing, and designing a response. You don't stop here, as many are prone to do. Implement the designed risk response. Assign an owner of the risk response, and get an estimated date from them. You know, that project managery stuff. Ensure that the project change was implemented to eliminate the risk, or the mitigation steps are executed to reduce the likeliness or impact. Make sure that insurance was purchased. Planning without doing anything is fruitless effort. Without executing a response now, you're merely accepting the risk, the default response, and not always the wisest one. Once the risk response is implemented by the owner, the risk can now move to a monitor status. Depending on the potential impact and likeliness, you can choose the level of monitoring you will invest in. And of course, if the risk was eliminated, there's not much point in monitoring it. Projects are formed in a different nature, and you will find yourself digging around in the PM toolbox on occasion because a tool is very necessary for the particular project you're executing. The processes, however, are important to all projects. Luckily, you can invest in the process and suit the project's characteristics. Risk management processes are sometimes tempting for people to skip because they are perceiving them as costly to manage. We certainly hope you understand that by breaking risk management into these processes and doing them, you will find risks far less intimidating, and you won't find yourself sitting on the curb, shocked by the impact of a particular risk coming about. You will be prepared and ready to handle and taking pride in the fact that even though the risk did come to pass, you and your team handled it professionally and responsibly. We invite you to engage with our Project Management Bootcamp course for more in-depth help. Launch your project management career with hksmnow.com.